Go. Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, the principal stopped me. He said, "You know, you have really great posture." And I said, "Okay, thank you." And I've heard that ever since. I think it comes from my grandmother. When I was a kid, slouching was not allowed. So
Mm.
we're constantly being reinforced of sit up,
Sit up.
stand up, uh, just things like that, and they stick. I mean, if you sort of reinforce that to an 8-year-old kid, eventually is going to stay. So,
Ideally, yes.
yeah.
Unless consequences or repercussions from grandma or whoever else.
Yes, indeed.
Um, do you think yeah, posture is an interesting one. Do you think it's about like your health and well-being, or do you think it's more about like presentation?
For me personally or in general?
In general, because I don't know. I haven't been around anyone's grandmother in a long time. Like, I don't know if that is continued. Like, I don't know if people still reinforce posture.
I don't think so because I see a lot of slouchers.
I also think about you it maybe the new slouching is your neck bent like this because you're looking at a phone or a tablet.
Yes, exactly. That's really contributing. And so you'll see now people kind of their natural postures, they head down, even if they're not looking at their phone, because, and there's been, research and reports about that people's posture is changing.
Sure.
So it's unfortunate.
Yeah, I've heard a couple. So posture is changing. I was listening to a podcast where a guy was talking about, in the future, one of the higher rates of cancer is going to be ocular cancer.
Oh, from,
Overuse, just overuse, looking at screens, not going outside to like, yeah, balance or like reset.
yep,
Um,
makes sense.
yeah, I didn't think about it. I was like, oh wow, damn. Okay, well,
I'm aware of that. I mean, I notice every day, probably by the end of the day, my eyes are pretty tired.
yeah.
And I know it's from looking at the screen, whether I'm talking to clients or working on my own stuff. So
Mhm.
I try. And then, we finish with our computers and then we're watching videos and TV for the rest of the evening. So you're right. It's good to get out and get some sun. Thank goodness today it actually came out.
Woo, yeah. This is like my first. Yeah, this is like the first Vermont day where I like bent my knee to Vermont. Like, okay, all right, I get it. Like, all right, I got it. I think I was able to like kind of get away. I don't know. I was able to get away with it, but today, like, it really caught my attention. Like, it caught my attention big time. I was like, oh my god,
Yeah, 6 below will do that.
yeah. Um, yeah. Anyway, whatever. Um, so thank you for doing this because this is it's been a long time since I've recorded a podcast. Like,
Mhm.
been a few months. I had to take a break. Um, we've had this conversation before. I was consumed by work. I didn't have I didn't feel like I was just kind of in motion, not really thinking about what's going on with me.
Yep.
And that came out in a number of different ways, right? I wasn't doing the things that I enjoy, which is like talking to people, recording podcasts. I wasn't eating well. I wasn't exercising.
Hmm.
Things became quickly too. Like, and it's just I'm glad I caught it, but yeah,
Yeah.
we talked about this before. You know, like weighing myself, and not saying that weighing yourself is the only way of like measuring health. But I like looked at the scales, like the heaviest I'd ever been.
Hmm.
Oh shit. I can't help but think something, if not a lot of that. Oh, I think my mic went out. Let's see if
I think it did. I
yeah.
can hear you, but it's not through the mic.
Yeah, hold on. Let's see. Man, I really thought we were gonna be good to go. Let's hold on.
High tech, high tech.
High tech, right? Really all it was oh, I realized exactly what it was. Um hold on. Okay, hold on 1 second. Okay, how about
There you go.
I do
Yep,
sound better?
yep.
Okay, back. Okay, great. I don't know what happened, but the outlet, whatever, the power adapter slipped out of the outlet. Anyway, what was I saying? The
You were talking about uh, weighing yourself, stuff
oh
you were not doing that you should be doing.
yeah, yeah, just I mean, really falling out of a routine, and uh, I don't know what. Yeah, just feeling really disconnected from myself, and
Yeah.
getting caught in. I don't know. Is there an official term? I guess you could call. Well, I don't know. Burnout. Burnout is like the end, but yeah. How would you describe kind of falling in to this work, um, and
Uh-huh.
then just not noticing kind of what's happening?
Well, it depends, it depends on the person in terms of how much they are connected to themselves that they would notice immediately if they were not connected. I think you've been dealing with a lot of stuff. You're in a new environment, new job, new people, and we're in the middle of a global pandemic, which has brought for everyone, myself included, additional stressors. And so it's easy to kind of lose track of who am I? What am I? What am I supposed to be doing? How do I deal with this stuff?
Hmm.
And the fact that we have no idea when any of this is going to stop.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe this is a good. Yeah, this is. Maybe this is a good time if you could, yeah, tell people what you do, kind of what your professional title is.
Uh huh.
Yeah.
Okay. Professionally, I work at the University of Vermont. I'm a licensed mental health counselor. I also have a side gig in that position, which is called Men's Outreach Coordinator, which is really just a title for a portion of my job that focuses on men and masculinity. So I focus on trying to support men in a variety of ways, and it has shifted and changed through the years in terms of what that looks like.
Yeah. Of
Uh, I don't know if you want me to talk about my other side gig.
course. Come on. Come on.
Well, so people can see that name there in the screen called the Crystal Warrior. So that's my other side gig. Um, I come from, I guess you could say, a lineage family of stone workers. My father was a stone carver,
Mm,
and he worked with stones, he worked with crystals, and without knowing it, I started doing the same thing too. I don't carve, but I definitely work with stones and crystals, and I make wands, which are made from copper and various types of precious and semi-precious stones. And so that's the crystal warrior on the side.
yeah. Well, it's all integrated in some way, shape, or form, right? It's
It
connected.
is. It really is. I mean, when I first started working as a counselor, I had this spiritual side to me, and I was not sure if I would be able to integrate it into my sort of day-to-day work with, college age students. But I found I was able to bring it in. Like I was doing mindfulness and meditation like 15 years ago, and then around, I don't know, maybe about 7 years ago, it became like the thing where you were like going to workshops and trainings to learn how to use these, skills and techniques in a clinical setting.
Sure.
And I was already doing it before it was like in.
Yeah.
So, but it was easy and, able to decide with each person I'm working with how much of this can they deal with? Are they ready to deal with it? And but it's been fine. It's been great.
Yeah. What have you noticed? What are some of the things that you've noticed in terms of the uh, the client student population that you're working with, whether or not they're ready. Yeah, are there
Oh,
certain things? Is there certain things that you're looking for? Where you're like, oh yeah, okay, you might be ready for this.
no, I just in the conversation, like depending on what they're presenting concerns is, and in my mind, I immediately think, oh, this might be really good for that, but is this person ready, able, up to this particular modality? Whether it's hypnosis, I've been using hypnosis with clients for a long time. So usually I'll just mention something
Mm,
and see how they react to it.
sure.
And if I get a positive, I'll go, okay, well, let's see if we can start incorporating this into our work. And I usually just educate people. I give them information. And like, I'm going to either give you or send you a document about self hypnosis or mindfulness or meditation. And then when you come back next week, let's talk about it and see if you want to take it further. And if they took the time to read it, that's a good indication. If they say, oh, I didn't have time, I was busy, I'm like, all right, well, we're not going to go there.
Yeah, yeah,
So, I'll present it. If they reach out, I'll reach out. And if it continues to be a back and forth, then we'll start incorporating the work, the sort of, if you want to call it spiritual development work, into what we do instead of just the typical sort of, you know, interacting with the client using those traditional techniques and things like that, which do and do not work for everyone.
sure. I would, yeah, I would assume that the some of this could be difficult for someone who is just entering into counseling or therapy, right? And they're specifically at a student population, a college student population, that might be.
Yes. Yeah, it can be. If they haven't been exposed to anything, it can be a bit overwhelming.
Mm,
You know, I was, what I found was challenging is when I was raised in a very religious home.
mm,
And so I had that sort of foundation, and then you sort of can potentially springboard from there to go, oh, well, there's other ways of looking at religion and God and nature and things like that. But so many of the young people now have none of that.
yeah,
And so they have nothing to work with. And so it can be a bit scary and overwhelming, although not as much now. Like I said, in the last 10 years, mindfulness has become sort of a catchphrase.
sure.
Meditation has become common in terms of people being aware of it. They may not be doing it, but they know what it is. Almost everyone I've worked with in the last 5 years or so says, yeah, I meditate on occasion, or I tried it once. So it's not this foreign alien thing. And
Yeah,
then the work is about, can I get them to start doing this on a regular basis and helping them to understand this is not a one shot deal.
sure.
Meditation is not, I did it, I'm done, I'm good. I say it's an ongoing thing. I said, and I'll use metaphors or examples to say, do you think if you went to the gym and worked out one day, you're going to have the body that you really want to have?
Mm,
No, I said, well, if you meditate once in your life, you're not going to get the benefits of it. I said, the benefits are cumulative, and over a period of time, you'll begin to see it. And I said, it's not going to look for you the way it's going to look for me. That's for you to discover, but you have to be consistent.
mm,
And and like I said, it varies in terms of people's commitment. Some people are completely committed and they get it, and
mhm.
some people do it occasionally, and some people they just don't have. And I also say there are other ways to meditate other than sitting in a lotus position. You can meditate through your sport,
Mhm.
through running, through, I play tennis. It's very meditative for me.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a thing called the Zen of tennis. So,
Wow.
you can incorporate mindfulness in a lot of different areas of your life other than the way that we traditionally think about it.
Yeah, I find my most um, kind of centered, connected is when I'm swimming. It's a very meditative practice for me. Like
Yeah.
it is the full. I mean, it just embodies so much. It is the spiritual connection with water. It,
Hmm.
um, um, obviously physical. There's breath work involved. It's
Yeah.
controlled breathing. I mean, yeah, that's why I love it so much. Which is again, when I don't do it, it's not surprising, right? I think I might have gotten it this time, right? Like, hey man, you can't you got to figure something out, you know.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to think about wherever I go, wherever I've moved, I found the pool. It's been one of my priorities wherever I go. If I
Yeah.
didn't live somewhere where there was like open water, but majority it's been pool. But
Pools.
like I have to find it, and it's not. I don't even know if it's intentional. I think it is so ingrained in me that like, oh yeah, it's almost like I walk. Oh, the pool. There it is. Yeah.
Well, when you say ingrained, you mean you had to have started at some point, or someone exposed you to it, or what?
I mean, I learned to swim when I was 3. Um,
Oh,
I started competing at age 6.
wow.
That was really the only thing I knew, um, in terms of like I played other sports, but not until I mean, I was really serious, like double practices, and really thought that's what the future might have been for me. Uh,
Yeah.
Yes, but yeah, yeah. I mean, so swimming has been a really yeah. I've had such a um, yeah, great experience. I've had a unique experience. I mean, I was taught to. I mean, for swimmers of color, specifically like black swimmers, it's not common.
It's not.
It's a real thing. There's definitely been a lot of lies told in history that folks of color, specifically black folks, don't swim, but there's a rich history of black people swimming, being excellent swimmers.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, I had a black swim coach. Um,
Wow.
I had a really diverse team. Like I had, kids that were Thai, Chinese, black, white. I would say it's pretty typical, like his a San Francisco that used to be,
Yeah, yeah.
where you really did see this, all these flavors of people. Uh,
Yeah.
I had again, I say like I've had a really unique experience in that way, um, and continued to coach uh,
Mhm.
throughout my life. I felt that there's a lot of not only again not the physical workout, but swimming was healing for me.
Mhm.
Like not to say that I grew up in the worst environment, but it was a complicated household. We'll say that
Okay.
complicated, and that was my place.
Mm.
That was my place to release some of that energy, frustration. Um, yeah, just let some of that go.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, yeah. So, and like a community, right? Like a community.
Mhm.
I wouldn't have said that then, but it was, and it seemed so natural. Like there was no thought of like, I gotta go. It's like, oh no, 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 I'm going. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
like I can remember being one of the only ones that practice like having solo practices with my coach on Saturday morning.
Mhm.
Um, but that's also, I mean, that's a whole different story in terms of burnout. That's one of the things about the sport that's really, for lack of a better term, fucked up. You can find, uh, you can find talented people early on
Yeah.
and burn kids out quickly. It takes so much time. It's so early. I don't know. When I say literally, I don't know. I don't know of any other sport where there's that where it's pretty like it's okay to do that.
Mhm.
It's okay to start kids out so early in that
Mhm.
kind of intensive program.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of work to maybe make people more aware, but it's still. I mean, we have 16-year-olds that qualify for the Olympics.
Indeed, we do.
Yeah, so it's like that. It's tough. It really is. It's a tough one where you're like, yeah, 16. That's really young. Like, um, so yeah. Either way, yeah, swimming. I say that because I've always approached, more or less. I've approached coaching in that way and recognizing that this is bigger than the sport for kids. Um, and if I'm teaching someone how to swim, this is similar to meditation. The same way, this is a lifelong practice,
Indeed.
right?
It's
Uh,
funny you mentioned that Lance Armstrong, who he was on the Drive, that show with Dr. Atia, and he actually started out as a swimmer.
yeah,
And he talked about what you were talking about, getting burnt out really early on and just kind of moving away from it because it was just too much.
yeah. It can be I mean, I think people who swim professionally, I mean, people who compete, it, it's, I think there's like something a little off about us because it's not in, you go back and forth. If you're talking like you go back and forth for hours
Yeah,
and you're with your own thoughts. It's a team, but it's
yeah,
it's you. Um, and so I've always thought swimming was just. I can admit it now. I was like, this is weird. Like this, you got to be a different person to do this. Again, I don't know another sport where people are asked to exert as much energy as they possibly can with limited oxygen,
yeah.
and you keep doing it. Like you keep going, and you're just like,
Yeah.
what are you doing? Like, what? Why do you enjoy this? Why do you enjoy this kind of like, I would say, like pain? You type of like feeling like you might pass out, but you keep going.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a strange. I will say it's a huge confidence booster. You can definitely develop, and I said this a lot when I was, well, I've said this a lot, but specifically when I was working with uh, young female swimmers,
Hmm.
that confidence early on, it was so apparent. Like when you could see it, and I think we talk, in if you're talking about childhood development and
Hmm. Hmm.
looking at female populations, like yeah, building confidence is so important. Not
Indeed.
to say it's not important for males, but I think that we can forget about developing female confidence, right? Um, I've always wanted to get more and more women of color in the sport because there's more. It's not only confidence. We're teaching early on um, acceptance of body image,
Hmm.
right? Like it's fine. It's your body. Like go learn how to use it. It's yours. It like you feel good. There's just a lot of there's so many things being structured. Learning. I can remember learning math through sport because you have to read a clock,
Gotcha.
like interval training, and you're doing that while you're tired. So yeah, I'm just there's a lot there, and I'm
Yeah.
grateful
Cool.
for the opportunity. Yeah. So that's I don't know how we started there, but I want to go back. I want to go back to you because this shit isn't about me. um, oh, we were talking about meditative practices and how they do not need to be
Yes.
one way. That's interesting that you mention the parallel between the gym workout, the physical workout,
Hmm.
because you arguably have to diversify your gym workouts. If you want to see results,
Yeah.
you can't do the same thing every single day for a year. I mean, you could if you want to.
Yeah, and I imagine you would see some results, but the I'm not a expert on bodybuilding, but I do know you have to diversify. You have to do different things. So you don't work on your biceps 7 days a week. You would work on different parts of your bodies. You do your legs. I notice at the gym where there are certain folks I see at the gym all the time, guys, and you can tell they are pretty much doing the same thing because this is huge. The upper body, the arms are looking at his little skinny little legs, and I always think balance there, balance. I don't know what your game plan. And sometimes I really would like to walk over to some folks and go, "What's your game plan? Like, what are you trying to accomplish?" because I see the results and I'm just curious if that's what you wanted. Okay, cool. You got it.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I don't know. Maybe you should ask them. I don't know what their response will be, but
In the gym, I
yep,
want to be cool about, and I thought it's really none of my business. It's just really a curiosity
sure.
because I'm always thinking balance,
Yeah,
that I wouldn't want this big upper body and these skinny little legs. I'd rather have less and balance, but that's me.
sure. Well,
Maybe maybe I'm a closeted, what is that? Libra.
I just want you to be careful when you're walking up to these huge dudes who these big old chests and arms, and you're like, "Why do you do this?" You know?
What's your point? What are you trying to? But, we know what they're doing for many of them. It's for men, it's about trying to present a particular image to the world. I mean, unless you're doing it professionally, which I don't think maybe only one guy at the gym. I think he's doing this professionally. The rest, I think it's just about creating a shell that helps you feel safe in the world. Particularly, the gym I go to, there's a huge age range of people at the gym from seniors to like teenagers.
Okay.
And you can definitely see how the conditioning has already been indoctrinated into them. The guys are like building muscles and cranking it out, and the women are doing kind of slimming and tightening exercises, tightening up their legs. They're not building. It's rare to see a woman who's actually building muscle.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have yeah, I don't mean, obviously there's nothing wrong with working on your physique, but it's
No,
interesting when we talk about, I mean, when we talk about this kind of indoctrination
it
in
is an indoctrination into masculinity.
yeah. So your thoughts about this, you talked about this shell, right?
Mm.
So again, there's nothing wrong with working on your physique. What is that shell? Are we talking like what is this protecting you from? What is the big arms and big chest?
Yeah.
B-
Well, I think it's protecting you from feeling vulnerable,
mm,
and trying to achieve what the society has told you you should be achieving, which is being the best at everything you do. You know, the other piece about shutting yourself down emotionally, because we know there's a lot of wounding that happens to all of us,
mhm,
and the shell protects us from having to deal with that woundedness. But we know it's there and it doesn't go away.
sure.
I think I said I'd be curious to see what counter those men are doing besides the physical work. What are you doing
Mhm,
about this? What are you doing about your spiritual self? But then again, there's no examples for young, if we're talking about boys, there's no examples of, men in our society who are working on their spiritual development and their emotional and psychological development. There really aren't any examples. The only thing we see are heroes,
hero.
you know,
Can you talk more about the hero concept?
well, the heroes are sort of archetypes that we all have in the collective unconsciousness. But for boys and men, the hero is this guy who saves the world, has all the answers, and never shows any vulnerability. He's never showing any weakness. And that's kind of what you get fed as a kid, that's how you're supposed to be. And then it becomes impossible to achieve because that means you're shutting down a piece of your humanity to get there. And again, we don't really have any examples of that, or anytime there's at least religious wise, anytime there's someone who seems to be up there talking about doing those things, we find out they are not that at all.
Mhm,
That's just kind of what they're putting out there because they know that's what I'm supposed to put out there, because if I put my authentic self out there, I'm probably going to be rejected. And sometimes even from my friends, I'm going to be rejected if I don't toe the line, if I don't say the things that they expect me to say if I don't live my life the way they think I should live it. I was just talking to a client the other day who was talking about getting sort of teased by his closest and oldest friends because he's kind of moving into a relationship
Mm.
and he's enjoying it. And they're like, well, if you go into this relationship, we're not going to be able to hang out. We're not going to be able to go to Montreal and go to strip clubs, you know. And I thought, so they don't really care that this is feeding you emotionally, this relationship. They're just concerned that they won't be able to go with you to do these sort of guy things.
Sure. Sure.
And they're not doing any work on themselves. So
Yeah.
they really see the work he's doing as kind of threatening their friendship. And we talked about that a little bit as well.
Yeah. I think again, talk going back to this indoctrination, I think it's so natural for young men to feel that way. And it's almost, I would probably say they're regurgitating something, right?
Yeah,
It's kind of what again, this is not an individual problem. This is like a systemic issue. Right.
yeah. It's a cultural issue. I mean, think of who the heroes are in that generally in our culture. They are, you know, and I'm using, particularly in movies, if we're talking about films, we're talking about Arnold Schwarzenegger, Bruce Willis.
Uh,
More recently, we've had several versions of Superman. We've had Batman. Now we have the Spider-Man. Like there's just this constant barrage of these superheroes who are not really being authentically present because they can't. But that's what kids see, and they think this is what I'm supposed to be like. Maybe not like a superhero, but certainly embodying many of these traits of sacrificing myself, looking out for everyone else. But it's rare that you see a superhero that's done any sort of internal work and dealt with their own wounds. I would say maybe some of the earlier Batman movies, what you saw was when he was a kid, his
yeah.
parents were killed in front of him, and that's kind of what led to him becoming the Batman, more out of revenge,
Yeah.
but
Uh,
to get back at bad people, but never really dealing with the pain and trauma of what happened to him.
yeah.
That would be a very different movie.
Yeah. Bruce Wayne with a therapist. That
If Tony Soprano can do therapy,
yeah.
Bruce Willis can do
Yeah,
therapy.
no, that's a good point. I think that actually would have been like a nice little twist
Uh-huh.
to see to see Bruce Wayne or I mean I can't imagine Superman or Clark Kent in therapy. Maybe he was doing journal. Maybe his therapy was journaling since he was writing. Um, but yeah, that would have been interesting to live this double life and
Mhm.
try to talk about that in with a therapist or a counselor. Or if it would better if he was part of a group. That would have been great. Like, so how was your weekend? All right.
Well, there was also well, obviously there were several Batmans, but there was also the one where his fear of bats happened because he fell down a well and it was a cave and there were a bunch of bats in there and they all kind of flew out.
Yeah.
And, so he had this fear of bats, but again, no one ever like addressed his fear.
No.
And it seems like, well, his response to that was, well, I'm going to become that which I'm most afraid of. But again, these are sort of metaphors you had to glean from the movie. They weren't really overtly telling you, oh, this is how he dealt with that.
Sure. Which is interesting. The more I think about it, his father was like a man for the people, right? Like what Bruce
Mhm.
Wayne's father was supposed to be this really like humble guy. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
entrepreneur.
entrepreneur, right, right. Um, and he went in a different direction.
Vigilante.
This- yeah, we also I think we forget about that. Like, yeah, he kind of just went on his own and was like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's complex. So we have these superhero characters that young boys see, and that could be their earliest exposure in some cases to what masculinity means.
Looks like, yes.
Yeah.
And also the other heroes are sports heroes,
Right.
football, basketball, hockey, all of these sort of competitive endeavors.
Hmm.
Um, and this thing about competing, which, if you're always competing against other men, then how do you sort of learn to connect to them beyond the competition, which is you don't really,
Right.
and again, there's just not a lot of models in our culture. And again, I'm not against sports. I think sports are great.
Sure.
But if that's the only representation that we are providing, young boys and men is to be this great sports person, and then you have all of these young men trying to again emulate that
Yeah.
and also getting exploited, particularly if we talk about sports, men of color and sports, particularly basketball and how they are exploited, constantly in this system, particularly the college system,
Sure.
where all of their energy and work goes into making millions and billions of dollars for all these other people, and they don't benefit from it at all.
Yeah.
And the hope, and we also know the percentages of those in that field who would eventually make it to the professional league is really, really small.
Sure. Sure.
Meanwhile, they've been used up and spit out and really oftentimes have nothing to show for all the years they spent, not even necessarily a good education, although that's what they say you're getting in
Yeah.
exchange, but that's just not true. And there's lots of stats that show that one of my good friends, that's his field of study,
Okay.
in sports and the NCAA and all of the exploitation that has been going on for hundreds of years.
I was watching the national football championship last week for Alabama versus Georgia, and it was it was complicated. We'll say complicated. I felt this way for a long time. I find it really fascinating that arguably, like, well, yeah, we'll say a sport that's 98% that's playing on the field, 98% young black men.
Hmm.
It, you know, this connection that people have, the way that they identify with with
Hmm.
the team is young black men, and so there's a disconnect there, right? There's a disconnect between the black men that are playing that sport.
Right.
They're the heroes
Yeah.
while they're on the field.
Yes.
In some cases, maybe in the in their a local town, if maybe if they're fortunate enough to, if they're a star player,
Of
right? Because
course.
most of those players are not big, they're not going to make it, right?
Right.
Play on the team. So, yeah, not that this is a new thought for me, but I was just looking at it and I was like, wow, this is majority. I would, from what I saw on the camera, it was a majority white stadium, right? The people
Hmm.
game, and uh, we,
Doesn't that fit in with that same, historical representation of Black folks entertaining
Mhm. Sure,
folks? That's why that fits in there, because I think that's the connection, is they're entertaining us. So as long as they're out there on the field or on the court entertaining us, then we're good.
yeah,
But like you're saying, that does not carry over to when they're off the field, to seeing them in that same positive way, because off the field they're not serving you, they're not making your day better, they're not giving you anything to cheer about,
sure.
you know
So it's fascinating to and this isn't specific. I mean, yeah, again, it is layered, complex, however you want to put it. Sports absolutely is an opportunity for some of these guys a-
Sure.
and women to go and continue their education,
Right.
right? So again, like, similar to what you were talking about with sports, and you're like, there's a place for it,
Hmm.
but it's having a deeper conversation about how are they being used, how are they being honestly, we know how they're being used. The next step is how are they being supported,
Hmm.
right? So who's supporting them academically, socially, emotionally? How are they receiving a holistic collegiate experience,
Experience.
right?
Well, they're not. You can't. You
No,
can't have both. You can't be, a tier one athlete and have a regular collegiate experience because most of your life is devoted to the sport, training, traveling, performing, or playing. That's it. You don't really, even at UVM, we're aware that those athletes generally are not involved in the broader community because they don't have the time. I mean, the amount of time that goes into training to be an athlete is unbelievable. And so they really aren't having that experience that most people have when they're in college.
yeah. Yeah, I don't know what the answer is. I'm definitely not opposed to them getting paid for sure. Like,
Yeah, they should at least be getting paid so that when they're done, they have something to fall back on.
yeah, I mean, there's countless stories of mm, student athletes finishing and then and like, well, now what? I didn't receive the education that I was promised. Um,
And why do and again, you would see a much higher percentage of success if you were just getting an education
sure. Yeah.
versus trying to do both of them with this sport piece not a guarantee. Not to say getting a degree is going to guarantee, but percentage wise, getting a degree, it does guarantee some stuff. You're going to probably be paid more, be offered a job versus not having it.
Yeah.
Um, but it is interesting that in our culture, education is not stressed as much in the Black and Brown community, as opposed to well, if you just do sport, and you become a big sports person, you'll be successful and you'll be able to achieve all the things you want to achieve, and you can do that with an education as well.
Sure. Absolutely.
And if you look at the percentages of particularly Black and brown men graduating from college, staying in college, going on to post college degrees, it's not really happening. It's happening for women
Yeah.
for sure,
Yeah.
but it's not really happening for men.
No.
And since the pandemic, it's gotten even worse.
Yeah. I was just talking about this yesterday, right? Yeah, the numbers have said that there's a decrease in male enrollment in the colleges and universities.
Yeah, there was a big article in the Wall Street Journal a couple months ago. In fact, I was interviewed for that article. Doug Belkin is the author, I believe.
Okay.
And the focus of that article was the fact that men are not staying in college. They're not, signing up to go in college. They're not staying and they're not graduating. And I told him, I said, this has been going on for quite a while. I said, this has been a known fact for a decade.
Sure.
It's just, again, it hasn't been addressed. You
Yeah.
know, colleges have been, it's interesting, colleges have been doing affirmative action for men for quite a while
Hmm.
because more women qualify,
Yeah.
but they want to have at least a balanced body of men and women, so they let in more men than, not to say they didn't qualify, but in terms of if we're just going on the score,
Yeah.
women are outscoring.
Hmm.
So it's interesting when you hear people scream and yell about affirmative action. It's like, well, let's look at how we've been doing affirmative action for, you know, college age men for quite a while.
Sure. Sure. So what are some of those yeah, I mean, I think some of the work that that you're doing is challenging in so many different ways, but the one I'm thinking about is how are you getting young men in the door, right? Like you're really coming in with this fresh young mind.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even say well, in a sense, I guess we could look at it in a fresh mind, but also with some real lived experience, right? Some I would say there are a lot of young men who are underdeveloped socially and
It goes back to what we were talking about of spending a lot of time developing our bodies and playing sports, but not really spending a lot of time and energy developing our inner lives to understand who we are, what motivates us, what do we like, what intrigues us. You
Mhm,
know,
mhm.
there's just not, it's just not happening.
Yeah,
And so then if you do go to college, it's really difficult, you know, because you don't know yourself, you don't really know what you want to do, or is it perhaps the thing that you really want to do is kind of frowned upon?
it's not encouraged, that's for sure.
You know, like suppose you, I don't know, you want to be an artist. Like how many people want to be an artist, you know? I say that because I went to school to be an artist.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And, you know, luckily I came from a family. My father was an artist, so it wasn't seen as odd or weird. And I got, you know, it was really difficult for me, mostly because I went to a predominantly white institution and there was a lot of stuff going on and I wasn't supported in academically.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm glad that I did it. It has served me all of my life. You know, I think I've talked to you about editing and, you know, Final Cut Pro and Photoshop and all of those things I'm very comfortable with because I have this artistic background. I've been able to incorporate them into my work as a counselor. I don't have them here because I'm not in my office, but you'll see posters that I've designed and working with our graphic designer, coming up with ideas, giving images that I think would be appropriate because I have this kind of artistic background that I majored in and I'm able to incorporate it in. And it's something I've said to students all the time who kind of want to be in a field that they're not getting encouraged. And I always tell them, I said, it's not going to be a waste. I said, you'll figure out a way to incorporate this into your life.
Mhm.
You just don't know right now because you don't know what you're going to be doing in 10 years. I said, but it's not a waste if you want to be an artist or a dancer or a musician or whatever it is. You
Yeah.
know, I said, you'll find a way to incorporate it into your life.
One of, if not the biggest transition in my life thus far was tapping into the creative, tapping into my creative mind. And that's when I started DJing.
Hmm.
Started DJing I mean, I'm not just saying DJing changed my life, but it, something changed. My thought process changed, expression of myself, identity, it changed. And
Hmm.
it took me as it yeah, it was so interesting. When I started DJing, again, it just seemed that I started gravitating towards other artists.
Hmm.
And I had never identified, I would never in my life have said, "Oh yeah, you know, like I'm an artist." I would never said that. But then when I started DJing and I was like, "Oh, I'm, you know, I can like hold my own. Like I'm good at this." I was like, "No, I'm an artist. I
Indeed.
there's creation here." And I think that um there's this I have no other way of saying it. It's like a freedom that you have in art that
Hmm.
I don't know if you can get anywhere else.
Well, I think you can. It depends on what area you're talking about, but I understand what you're saying. It's funny. A friend of mine has not been working for the last year, and she has started crocheting. And she was saying the other night, Keith, I suddenly have all of this creative energy.
Mhm. Mhm.
She said, I've never done any of this before. And
Yep.
now she's like cranking out, crochet blankets and things.
Sure.
And it's creative. And she says, I've never done anything creative before. And I said, it's always been there. I said, it's just, it didn't have a venue, it didn't have an outlet where you can bring that creativity into your work. And again, it depends on what you do, what your creative thing is,
Sure.
obviously you couldn't, it'd be very difficult to bring that creative thing to, being a CPA. I'm not sure how you'd bring crocheting into being a CPA, but I'm just saying, I think we all have this creativity in us.
Mhm. Mhm.
If it's just a matter of how do you develop it? Is there space for it to be developed? Whether it is through, you know, DJing or painting or drawing or dance or music or whatever it is, I think we all have these abilities. It's just we live in a structure, we live in the matrix that has creates boundaries for us through the messaging, the indoctrination into belief systems, and you think, well, I could never do that. All you have to do is watch a couple episodes of The Voice.
Oh, your favorite show?
No, it's not my favorite show, but it's a show where you will see people who've never done what they're doing.
Mm.
Like I was watching, I think it was the European version of the Voice, and the guy who won was a firefighter,
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. I see what you're
and
saying.
he said, I never sang in public before this time. Oh, I think he said yeah. He said I did it because I sang at my mother's funeral or something like that. And he said that's how I started. And he had all of these people backing him, and he ended up winning The Voice. And he's a firefighter.
Yeah.
And those are two things you don't really think of mixing. But
Yeah.
I was watching him going, he has this creativity in him
Yeah.
that really up until that point hadn't expressed itself, and I think particularly around the issue of masculinity, there's so many boundaries that we're put in, that says you're not allowed to express yourself this way. You're not even allowed to express this,
Yeah.
you know. And we take it, we believe it. We believe I'm not, okay, I guess I don't have any creativity, or I guess I can't express my pain, my heart through some creative outlet because it's not allowed. So I'm going to just sit on it. And then, of course, we have what we have in our culture, which is constant violence, constant killings,
Mhm.
mass shootings, generally happening by men,
Yep.
who have all of this stuff that has never had a chance to get out of them. And then it comes out in the form of hurting. And we know, you either are going to hurt yourself or you're going to hurt someone else,
Yeah.
And again, it's not something in the culture we talk about in terms of why are there so many mass shootings? Why are there so many men killing like innocent strangers on the street who they don't know?
Sure.
Because we never have those conversations. It just becomes, well, we need to reduce guns, and we need to change the laws, which have never happened. All of these external responses versus, well, what's going on with our men in this society that leads them to do so much violence and harm to themselves and to the world?
Yeah.
No one really asks those. We don't ask those questions, and we don't have those discussions as a society. We don't.
What do you think prohibits us from having those discussions?
Patriarchy.
I, it's so maybe the better question is, I mean, I see progress. I mean, I try to remain optimistic.
Yes.
I don't try. I remain optimistic
Uh-huh.
because, a um really wonderful thing was coming to Vermont and connecting with you, right? Like those those small things where I'm like, okay, so there's when it's like when you meet the person, like, no, you know what? Actually, my focus is working with young men. I'm like, oh man, really wonderful. That's where my head is at, right? So is it those kind of Is it? I guess I'm going back to this hero identity. Where or how? Maybe this is like too much of like this is too big of a question. How do we continue to like shed light on the people that are doing this type of work?
Uh,
Like, how do we make essentially what I'm thinking about is when you're talking, I think about this like specifically in the collegiate environment, like the academic versus the person who the person who's an academic who comes up with all these who can quote theories and
yes.
talk about all these ideas but has no plan of implementation.
Well, and that's okay. Michael Kimmel, I don't know, do you know Dr. Michael Kimmel?
uh
He's from SUNY, New York. He's written tons of books about men and masculinity. He was the premier person who could talk about it and was doing things, and then he kind of had a Me Too moment in
ah,
his career that kind of shut him down, and I haven't kind of heard about from him since. He was even working with myself and other folks at UVM to try and get something going in terms of engaging men, and then this thing happened, and the university just kind of shut that down. But he had started a men's center
mm,
at SUNY, and I'm telling, the best men's conference I ever went to was his, which was in New York City, probably, I don't know, it may have been 2012 or 15. And what he did was he brought the academics with the practitioners
mm,
together,
okay.
and it was just one of the most amazing conferences I've ever been to, because usually you get one or the other. You get people who are doing the work talking with other people who are doing the work, or you get people who are talking about their research,
Yeah.
and that's who they're talking to. But that was the purpose of his men's center, which was to bring those two folks together, and it was going well, and then this happened and they shut it all down.
Yeah.
So um yeah. What's your question again? Go back to your question, because I got lost in thinking about
No,
what a horrible loss
no,
that was.
just I'm interested in like how do we make essentially how do we make this shit cool? How do we make exploring yourself? How do we make
Um,
how do we transition
yeah.
from where we are? And I think we are changing. I've heard more young men. I mean, again, anytime I'm meeting with the student, a male student, uh for them, I mean, I can't. I mean, I can't think about how many times it's. I've never said that before. Oh, this is my first time. Like, yes, okay, great. Where do we go? Okay, so where do you want to go from here? Like, you verbalized it. You acknowledged that there's something that
Neat. Yeah.
you want to change.
I think there's a couple ways it can happen. I think, for instance, I'm thinking of someone I've been working with who is a former athlete,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and has people's ears,
Yep.
and if he talks about these things and makes them normal and acceptable and doable,
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be is a great role model for others. And actually, he let me. I have been working with him, and it's okay for me to mention that he let me videotape him talking about the work that we've been doing.
Okay.
And I thought, this is so rare to see a man of color, former athlete, talking about his mental health
Mm-hmm.
and the journey that he is on, or the journey that we've been on to get him to where he's going.
Sure.
I think that will have a huge um, impact on other young men who, if they happen to or are lucky enough to see him talking about this,
Yeah.
or if he starts talking about this publicly,
Yeah.
I think that's where the change can happen. Otherwise, I really just think it's that individual stuff. And Even I'm thinking in all the years I've worked at UVM, trying to get a group of men of color together was the hardest thing I've ever done. Again, the pandemic just put such the kibosh. So at UVM, there's the Mosaic Center for Students of Color, and I have for many years been sort of facilitating and co-facilitating what we call the Brotherhood, which is really just a gathering of men of color.
Okay.
And just before the pandemic hit, we had gotten to a place where we had men of color from the community, professors, students, staff, all coming together
Wow.
and sharing. And it was like a dream come true.
Hmm.
I think our last meeting, there were probably 15 or
Wow.
more men at that gathering.
That's a
And
lot.
to the extent where they would stay, it wasn't like they showed up and left, they stayed.
Yeah.
And it was great because particularly the elders in the community, were able to sort of connect and see, oh, I can connect with this one, or there was a connection coming that way because they were into math or science or whatever it was. And there was someone in that space that they could connect with, and mentoring was starting to happen. It was just really, really, it was the thing I had always dreamed of, particularly for men of color. I've actually had more success getting young white men to come together
Hmm.
and support each other than men of color.
Hmm.
Um, and that's always been the case. And so this year I've been really making an effort, even with the pandemic, of putting more energy into getting more men of color engaged, or getting messaging out to them that's relevant to them, mostly around mental health.
Yeah.
Like, come and talk to, we got a bunch of counselors of color at CAPS.
Yeah.
Find one and come and talk and deal with your mental health, with the messaging around, this is important.
Yeah.
This is important that you do.
Yeah.
So I think that's really going to be the answer. I think it's going to be just these individual things. I don't see it happening on any large scale.
Sure. Sure.
You know, I've never seen it. I've never seen a large scale effort to shift men in this society.
Mm.
I just think there are just too many variables, race, gender, age, sexuality. I think it would be virtually impossible for one person to be able to talk to all of those groups.
I want to kind of, I don't know if this is a transition. We know how you know ignoring your mental health can harm you. We know violence um, comes out of this. We know sexual assault is a real thing. How does Yeah, how does this affect? I would say, how does this affect women? Actually, let's before we go to how does this affect women, how does this affect men in their relationships with other young men when they are not taking care of their mental health, when they continue to
Mm,
practice these really unhealthy learned behaviors?
yeah. Well, I think as you said, I think they don't develop. I think they kind of get stuck in a developmental stage
Mm.
because they don't know how to move out. They don't know how to heal. They don't even know healing is what needs to happen in this situation.
Yeah.
For instance, last semester, um, Mike Hill and Bev Colston, who's the director at the Mosaic Center, we got together with some athletes of color and, you know, talked with them because they were, you know, experiencing some challenges as athletes on a predominantly white campus, and
Mm.
we were trying to help them. And I could tell, like, the mental health piece, they just weren't able to make the connection.
Mm.
Like, some of them were sharing very difficult early life experiences that, hearing them as a counselor, you're like, that's traumatic,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's trauma, you're carrying it. It's not going to go away just because you laugh it off. But from my efforts to try and get them to think about their mental health, I could see it wasn't landing. And it wasn't because they were just blowing, it just wasn't landing. Like, I think it was probably the first time in their life they'd ever heard anyone perhaps say, that's traumatic.
Yeah.
That should be addressed. And
Sure.
so I think they just didn't have a reference point. I think if we have the opportunity to continue meet with them on a regular basis, I think eventually they'll get to a place where they go, oh, okay. And some of it is also, well, I trust this guy
Sure.
enough that I would go and talk to him about this thing that happened to me when I was 15 years old.
Mm. Yeah. Mm. S- Yeah. Hmm. So I'm thinking, one of the things that I asked you about women, and then I went right back. I'm really fascinated in entering identity development, masculine identity development
Mhm.
through romantic relationships. Like it seems, and I would say specifically, I haven't worked with a lot of gay men, but
Mhm.
I would say more the heterosexual men that I've worked with. Talking about themselves in a romantic relationship is much easier. Like they're like, "Oh yeah, okay, cool, yeah." Like she's this way now. I'm like, "Oh, okay, great. Like this is a good starting point."
Yes.
And uh, I would love to hear your opinion. And I don't know if I don't know if you've experienced this. I don't know if you've seen this before.
Yes.
What is it about the romantic relationship? Why is it a great entry point?
Uh,
What makes it an easier entry point for
because it's probably for many men the only place in their life where they have attempted to make a connection with someone that's not competitive.
Hmm. Hmm.
No, it's also a relationship in which they are getting emotionally fed in a way that they probably are not getting it anywhere else.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, I've also had the opportunity because of my role as men's outreach coordinator. Through the years, lots of men have been sent to me who have gotten into trouble for sexual misconduct.
Hmm.
And so that also has provided me with an avenue of talking to them about their identity.
Hmm.
You know, whether or not they did what they were accused of doing is not what I was really looking at. I was looking at what beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors led to you sitting in my office right now.
Yeah.
And that provides an additional opportunity to talk about patriarchy, misogyny,
Yep.
and how that might be showing up in their relationship. And again, I've worked with men of color, white men, all types of men. Um, it's interesting. I do. This is my theory that a lot of domestic abuse is about the fact that if we're talking about particularly heterosexual men, we're talking about the only opportunity that they have to open up, to be vulnerable, and to feel something deeply is when they're in relationships with women.
Yeah.
And so that's a great thing. So I want to hold on to that.
Sure. Sure.
I don't want anyone else to have a piece of that,
Uh,
that us, and I say that not, but I mean, I don't want anyone else to have access to her because what she gives me is something I don't get anywhere else. And so I'm going to try and control her.
mm,
And
mhm,
I think that's my theory of where domestic abuse comes from.
mm,
Um, um, and also, it's a great opportunity to really break down the belief system and how did you get to believe what you believe.
yeah.
And the other piece is how do you have a healthy, loving relationship? Like, what's your model?
Mm,
Like, what are you going for? Are you just kind of winging it, or do you have in your mind an image of what you're trying to achieve? And most people don't really have an image. We have our family dynamic and what we saw growing up. That's our role model, whether we like it or not.
sure.
And if you grew up in a household where you weren't seeing a loving, caring, mutual, equal relationship, you that's kind of what you're going to adopt.
Yeah.
And I haven't really seen, it's rare if ever I've seen someone who came from sort of a bad situation create a really great, healthy relationship.
Yeah. I'll be very honest. I have struggled with that for a long time. I've struggled with that myself. Um, I accepted um, being unfaithful as a norm.
Hmm.
I said, "Oh, yeah, that's normal. That's what people do. Like that's what men do.
That's what men do.
What men do. It's fine." And I would verbalized it. I mean, I can't count how many times I would say, "Yes, all men cheat. Yes, yes, all men cheat. It's okay." And it wasn't just like all men cheat. It was like, so it's okay. That's
So,
basically it's fine. And not really exploring what cheating meant. It's you
yeah,
lied to someone.
yeah, yep,
You misused, you abused someone's trust.
yep.
And that's, I guess, once I got to that point where I was like, oh, oh, oh shit, I get it. Like, it's not necessarily, yes, there's a, depending on what type of cheating it is, if it's emotional or physical cheating,
Yeah.
it's that you're comfortable in treating someone very poorly,
Right.
being disconnected. We all have urges, we all have those moments. It's not about denying those, but it's not being able to acknowledge, again, the disconnection of like, oh no, it's fine, it'll be, I do what I want.
Yeah. I do what I want.
And I saw that early on. I heard that acceptance, I heard that messaging. um
Hmm.
I don't necessarily know if I don't know if I saw it. Actually, of course I saw it. I think we see it all the time. We see it on TV. If you
Yeah.
don't see it in person, you see it on TV. It's in conversation. It's taken me a long time to finally get that, like, oh, it's really not okay. And it wasn't, again, a big eye opener. It wasn't necessarily about how I treated the other person. I went more internal and like, what is up with you where you're okay with doing this?
Hmm.
Like, yes, the other person is hurt, and I want, I was like apologetic. I mean, it didn't take me to be really apologetic until, the maybe later on in my relationships.
Yeah.
But it was, yeah, it was rough. I mean, I understand why some people are like, I don't want to go to counseling, I want to go to therapy, because it was rough. Once I started exploring what was going on inside,
Yeah.
exploring, I like continuing to explore identity development in a very thoughtful way. And then,
It's usually some pain that's underneath the behavior.
oh, I was a big baby. I mean, I will never forget that. I'll never forget that day. I'll never forget that day where, I mean, I was I mean, so much came up. So much came up about masculine identity.
Hmm.
Um, Talking about, thinking about my relationship with my father, thinking about my relationship with my mother, family. What I mean, it all came crashing. That was great. I'm glad it happened. I moved. I think good things have come from it, but at the moment, it was scary. It was just
Very scary.
like all of that was there. Like
Right.
all of that was there, huh? And
And, I think on some level, folks know there's something there and it's a lot, and I'm not going to deal with it.
I don't want to deal with it.
I don't want to deal with it. In fact, I think I share with you the book I'm reading now, which is I don't want to talk about it.
I don't want to talk. Great book suggestion. So yeah, phenomenal book suggestion for
It
any.
is just such an amazing, and I'm working again with someone, and I said, read this book. And they said, every chapter is my life.
Oh
They
yeah,
like, it's painful, but every chapter is my life. Um, and the book, for people who don't know, get the book. It's about depression. It's really about depression in men and how depression shows up in men, which is very different than how it shows up for women. And again, as a society, we don't talk about men's depression.
No.
You know,
Mm,
we think of depression and we usually see an image of a woman, and
mm,
that's what we think it is. That's what we think depression is. And we don't educate men to understand, yeah, maybe the reason you're drinking so much or partying so much, or maybe because you're kind of depressed
yeah.
and you just don't know that that's what depression is. So some of this also is about, the lack of education in our communities around, these issues.
Yeah. No, this relentless approach to work, physique,
Yeah.
drinking, eating. It's I think you would call it like overt versus covert depression.
Overt versus covert. Exactly.
Yeah. Really fascinating. I mean, I started listening to an audiobook and I think I need to actually I don't know. I might buy the physical book.
Yeah.
It's great to listen to, but I think having the physical book might
Yeah.
be something to do. Yeah, no, and applaud we applaud those behaviors, right? He's such a hard worker. Oh man, I envy him at the gym. Like, look how strong he is. Again, nothing wrong with being strong. Uh, but when there's something else going on, and
Mm.
that's how you're coping, not working on,
Yeah.
as you said before.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, I man that book. What's God? What's his name? What's the author's name again? It's blowing my mind.
Terrence Real.
Terrence Real. When he talks about sitting down with his own father,
Yes.
when he talks about sitting down with his own father and getting to that place, yeah, I think I re-listened. I think I like re-listened to that part
Yeah.
several. Um, I yeah, I don't know if envy. I see that being like huge. Like it was so powerful for him to sit down with his father and he obviously has healed, like has
Hmm.
healed, where
Hmm.
he can sit down and he knows how to have the conversation with him.
Yes. And a lot of that is he works predominantly with men
And yeah,
and couples also.
sure,
You
sure,
know. So you mentioned, when you were asking earlier about men in relationships, he works a lot with couples and helping. And it's generally men he's working with, even though both of them there, and they usually are there because the wife said, if you don't go get some help, we're done. And I can't tell you how many men have shown up in my office because their girlfriends or partners said, if you don't go get some help, we're
and
done.
we're done.
And I'm like, that's why you're here?
Uh, Again, I think that's I wish it wasn't that way, but if that's how we're gonna get men into healing,
Yeah.
any type of support service, then shit, I'll take it at this point. I mean,
You were asking earlier about the impact on women. That's one of the impacts on women is that they are in these relationships with men who can't be present, or if they are present, they're abusing the women on some level,
sure.
because they might be depressed and their addiction in their depression is sex with their wives. And there's a story in that book about this guy who like freaked out if his wife went away on business
Yeah,
because he didn't have access to her, because access to her sexually was how he dealt with his depression.
yeah.
Like, who would have thought of that? Like, that's how you deal with your depression is through sex? Seems very complex.
Quite complex. Also, if you know, if you're a woman, and how does that help you, right?
It doesn't.
Yeah,
It doesn't. And, I think, and if we as men aren't emotionally taking care of ourselves, that means the women in our lives are the ones taking care of us. So who takes care of them?
correct. 100%.
And how do we even have the capacity to meet their needs if we don't even know what's going on with ourselves?
Hmm.
Meanwhile, women are, doing all the work, all the physical labor of raising children, taking care of the home, maybe have a job, and then taking care of us too.
Sure.
It's too much.
Yeah.
It's an unfair burden. I don't know how women do it, honestly, but other than the fact that they have been doing it for thousands of years, but I don't know how they do it.
I think there's some real superpower shit that women have.
We were talking about heroes, right?
Yeah, no. I mean, I've said this real. I didn't really. I wasn't able to articulate it until maybe like 4 or 5 years ago. I knew it, but I couldn't pick. Again, Um, I couldn't articulate it.
Uh-huh.
And 4 or 5 years ago, I forgot who I was talking to, but I was like, "No, y'all are like superhumans." And maybe it was a friend of mine. Maybe it was my friend Alexis. I can't remember, but I've seen women communicate with each other without talking, and witnessed I've witnessed it. I think most people have, but maybe they didn't really acknowledge or they couldn't really see it.
Uh-huh.
It was nonverbal communication. It was, some people would call it mind reading. Some people would just say, "Oh no, it- it's so subtle." I've seen it happen. I'm like, "Oh, y'all communicate without saying a word." I mean, it's a look, it's a feel. There's something that happens, and I haven't. I think maybe I've been able to pick up on that from the work and the amount of people, the amount of women that I've been exposed to. Not exposed to in like a romantic way, but just being around a lot of women. Right. I mean, I remember seeing that early on. I knew there was something different about women early on living in the house with my mom and my sister. I was like, yeah, this is different. This is just a different energy. This is a different communication style. And this is generally, I know I'm generalizing here, but I really do think that
Well, I was gonna say, you know that over 90% of communication is nonverbal.
correct. We don't, I don't think it's as normal for men to
Men,
have that.
no, it's not. And this is again going back to the pieces of us that get shut down
Mm,
because women don't have exclusive access to intuitiveness or nonverbal communication. It's just that they develop that ability or skill because one, it's a necessity,
mm,
and
mm,
there's nothing that's inhibiting it.
mm,
Whereas for men, there's a lot that inhibits us from connecting to that intuitive self that we all have. I call it the internal guidance system that we all have that tells us this is what's going on here,
sure.
but if you don't listen to it, follow it, act on it, it's like a muscle. It stops working.
Yeah.
And I just think that women have cultivated that ability more so than men because I mean, when we think of intuition, we think of women, and it's like this is a human
It's a,
quality. It's not a gendered quality.
mm, yeah, no, that's a good point. Mm, that is a good point. Yeah. So we failed to like we failed to develop that right through.
Development, exactly.
Yeah. Huh.
It could start as early as whatever the age is, 3, 4, 5, and you're having an emotional response to something in the book. I don't want to talk about it. One of the case studies where um, one of the guys in that men's group talks about standing in his kitchen at age 5, wanting to be picked up or touched, and everyone is just ignoring him, mom, dad, everyone,
Yep.
and he shut it down. He
Suppressed.
shut down. What he was saying is, I need something right now. I know I need something right now. And everyone, and as he says in the book, he thinks some of that was about them trying to toughen him up,
Toughen him up. Yeah. Yep.
you
Yeah.
know. So you need to shut down that need to be comforted in life and like just deny that.
Hmm.
And so really it was really his inner self was saying, I need to be touched right now. I need to be hugged.
Yeah.
You know, that's what I need. And it didn't happen. And so you can imagine that happening over and over and over. You do eventually just shut down
Yeah.
that part of yourself so that you can, meanwhile, you're still physically growing, going to school, getting an education, getting married, career, all that stuff. Meanwhile, that thing that happened to you multiple times when you're 5, 6, 7 has never been addressed.
Sure. it usually is the story, right? I mean, it's usually a story. Everything that's happening right now, yeah, this didn't happen yesterday.
Yesterday, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I could go in 1,000 different directions, but I also want to be respectful of your time.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. My intuition was working.
Look at that. Look at that.
Man, it's probably like, all right, man, this is good, but I look, we can do it again.
That would be my pleasure.
Yeah, yeah, we can do it again. I really yeah, I appreciate it. I've been wanting to do this for a while. And I told you I was like, man, I wonder and it's not off the table. Maybe we need to figure out how to do this more routinely.
That
Yeah,
would be awesome.
yeah, exploring some of these conversations specifically around masculinity. Um I think it's kind of like, yeah, I mean, why not? I mean, we talked about like what needs to, like I asked you, oh, well, what do you think needs to change? And it's like, well, the conversations need to
More
continue.
conversations, indeed. I
And
agree.
how do I make sure I'm sharing these conversations? How do I continue to promote this and encourage? Yeah, I guess just putting it out into the universe, like, hey, it's happening, and let's try to get this. Yeah, let's continue to try to get this messaging out. What's your can you tell everyone what your website is if they're interested
Yes.
in exploring crystals or just more about you?
Yeah, my website is www.crystalhealingwands.com.
Wonderful.
And there you will find information about me, about my wands that I make. You'll also find stuff about soul realignment, which is intense, and archetypal clearing, which is intense. Those are some of the other offerings that I have. So go there and you'll find some fascinating stuff there.
Wonderful. So last question that I ask all of my guests. Um what is something that you are in love with right now?
What is something that I am in love with right? I all right. I'm going to be very open and honest.
Yeah.
Hot baths.
Wow, okay. Hot bath. Yeah, I can see that as I gaze out into the winter
Yes,
wonderland out there.
I've been taking hot baths since last week, and they are just amazing. It's also a place where I meditate,
Okay.
but it's just something about being in hot water that's just very relaxing and stress reducing. So that's what I'm in love with this week.
Well, sounds great. Well, thank you again. I really enjoyed this, and we will do this again.
All right, thanks, Joseph. I'll talk with you soon.
All right, take care, buddy.
All right, bye.